So, first, please I'll introduce myself. My name is Jeremy Hutchison-Krupat. I'm the director of the Master's and the Postgraduate Diploma in Entrepreneurship here at the Judge. And today, just to give a little sketch of what I'd like to go through is just to first give a snapshot of who is in our program currently. And there's some obvious caveats that go with that, right? So the current cohort is the first year of the Masters. So I want to be upfront to say that this isn't representative of what we have every year for a long period of time. It's what we have in the current cohort, and we don't have, there's not specific quotas or characteristics. We are hoping for the most. We welcome and want as much diversity as we can in the program. So what I want to do through this talk is to I'll give you that first overall snapshot of what does the current cohort look like, and then I want to have just a quick discussion on just why diversity is so important. It's something that everyone talks about a lot, but especially within the context of entrepreneurship, just why it's so critical and why it matters to us. And then I'd like to have close and lead into what we do systematically within the Cambridge Judge Launchpad to both welcome, accommodate, instill diversity throughout our programs. So with that, and I want to say here that please, at any point, try and pipe up. I'll keep my eye on the chat window and try and answer questions as best I can. So without, as there's nothing there to address quite yet, let me just dive down. Let's see if I can get things to switch over. So right now, the class size that we have is, just over 100 students. We have it's 30 in the postgraduate diploma and 81 in the master's. This really is just a distinction, meaning that the 30 of them are in the one-year program. And up front, we're going, in the long term, people can enter through the master's and still get a postgraduate diploma after a year. So if you're interested in the program and looking at the master's versus the postgraduate diploma, this is something that we'd be more than happy to discuss with you, and please reach out to us to understand the differences in that. The ages range a very, very vast range. Now, averages and medians and ranges clearly don't tell the full story, right? So there's a long tail out to 64. That is the full variance. The mean's 35, and that mean is dragged up a little bit by in the 60s. But this is really to say that there's people of all different stages in their careers. We're not so much focused on what stage we want to make sure that everyone in our program is here because they want to learn about entrepreneurship. They're interested in the practice of entrepreneurship, starting a venture, and hungry to learn more. 66%, 2/3 of our cohort run their own businesses. Others are in entrepreneurial ventures. Some people are in family businesses. Some people are in the current cohort are on the VC side of things. We have a split in terms of gender of 65% male, 35% female. And then in terms of the global side, the best way to look at this is actually the next slide, right? So one of the real big benefits of being a part-time program like we are is that we can get such great global coverage, right? So we have all corners of the globe essentially represented here, and this just allows for really rich discussion in terms of how things are done in different parts of the world, right? Different customs, things that might work in one place and don't work in another, right? So this is a really, really powerful aspect of the program, and something that we're really proud of. And and something that is very nice when we do get together in the residentials, right? So in the residentials, people is the one time when people from all around the globe can come here to Cambridge and really get to interact in a face-to-face manner. Finally, if we look at another perspective, right? So from a diversity perspective, there's many different ways we can kind of slice things up, and this is really is to say this picture is just saying there's many different industries represented, right? And this is actually this is lumping them into much bigger categories than they are, because clearly there's people in the agri-tech space and the gov-tech space, right? So along all of the different pathways that we offer here. And then there's people that are not in a specific pathway, right? So on the other and none, these are ones that don't fit in there, and then none doesn't mean they're not obviously in some industry. They've chosen, as we'll talk about later, to not take a pathway for credit, right? Which is something that I want to address later, which is a really important aspect of our program, right? Okay, so having that, one of the questions, discussion topics that I often ask people just out of curiosity, and I definitely ask prospective students, and one of the things I often get asked is, what makes a successful entrepreneur? What are the characteristics? What are the soft skills of a successful entrepreneur? And clearly, people will say hard work, perseverance, being passionate, all of these aspects. But one of the things that really always stands out is people say, the ability to persist when others would quit, right? So when things get really hard, after failure, to be able to deal with adversity, to be resilient. However, entrepreneurs also require this ability to listen, right? So to be coachable. They need to seek out, internalize, and synthesize information. And this is interesting, right? Because there's this side of entrepreneurs that need to just persist and go and not quit and push and push and push. But at the same time, you have to be cognizant of what's going on, and make sure you seek out good opinions, right? And be able to, synthesize that information and come to meaningful and effective decisions. In the end of the day, this means that entrepreneurs, it's critical to excel at both divergent and convergent thinking, right? So divergent thinking, being able to see the alternative perspectives, being able to see the opportunities, a different way of doing something, and recognize that is a critical, fundamental skill of entrepreneurs, but also be able to say, okay, that's a different way. How can we solve this? How can we come to a solution on the convergent side? Right? And when we think about this, and when we think about all of the norms that are in place as we grow up, all the societal norms, all of the mechanisms that are in place, if you were to look at this, and I'll see if anyone is in the mood for typing on this and wants to be interactive in our small group here. Where do you think we generally excel and this I won't even say entrepreneurs, but just humans in general, on the divergent side or convergent side? See if anyone feels like interacting in our webinar here. Us as adults, do we generally excel at convergent or divergent? I've got it. It appears that Chelsea is piping in, and kudos to anyone for piping in on this, because this is going to get at one of the key things here. Oh, and it's not. Yeah, so exactly. Thank you, Chelsea, so right here, Chelsea's already got beyond the fact that you're contributing to this, and you're getting over some of the thank you, right? So you're getting over some of the biases that I'll talk about later in terms of fear of evaluation and fear of failure, right? Kudos to you for putting yourself out there and taking a stab at this, right? But yeah, generally, everything we do as we grow up is geared towards convergent thinking, right? We learn to do things the right way. We learn the meanings of things. And I think there's no better picture that says this than the one I'm going to put up next, which is a really interesting study, and I refer to it often. And this is, so this is, there was a fellow, George Land, who was responsible for testing engineers and people that wanted to work at NASA. And they wanted very creative engineers to solve problems there. So he had come up with hundreds of thousands of tests given to adults. And he decided one year that let me actually give this same creativity test to young school-age children and see how they do on this. And then he followed these same children and retested them when they were 10 years old and 15 years old. Right? So the adult data is the data that he had on all of the people that had wanted to work at NASA. And this really tells a powerful story. Right? So when he tested the 5-year-olds, and my guess is this picture is probably not surprising to you, right? So when you look at that, you go, yeah, you know what? 5-year-olds are pretty creative, right? 5-year-olds, when you ask them, one of the typical tests of creativity that's used is something that's known as an alternative use test, where you place an object in front of someone and ask them to list all of the uses they could think of for that. And this is one where when you do that with a 5-year-old, an object could be anything, right? Because their mind is very wide open, and in some cases they're just not sure what it's used for. They see something and it could be used for many different things, right? But by the time they're 10 years old, they learn to say the right answer. They don't want to be wrong at school, right? Many more things have taken on meaning. And we see this creativity now is down in the 20th percentile. By the time they're 15, it's down in the teens. And by the time they're adults, it's in the single digits. Right? So part of this is to say, well, you can look at it and say that's a really depressing story of creativity and divergent thinking. But then you have to look at it and say, well, there's two positive aspects. One is that this is just part of efficiency and learning, right? So it would be pretty difficult to get through our daily lives if everybody as adults was arguing over the meaning of typical objects, right? So if someone had a cup and someone was using that cup to step on as a stool, someone were to sit down on it, would be pretty ridiculous, right? But the other side is to say we all started with the ability to be creative, right? So a lot of times we're looking at this and people are saying, how can we be creative? How do we learn how to be creative? And this one says, well, it's not necessarily that we need so much to learn how to be creative. Our whole lives we've unlearned how to be creative, right? There's so many biases and systemic mechanisms in play that we've basically we've converged to meanings on everything. And then it just makes it really hard to think of things differently. But that doesn't mean that we can't do that, right? So this picture is one that I think is a really powerful one to say sometimes we need to just remember to think a little bit more like a 5-year-old. And all of the things that are driving this are things that when we think about diversity and we think about how diversity can help us break out of the conformity, right? Break out of the convergence towards single meanings, right? Diverse perspectives can help us do this because not everything takes on the same meaning from every single perspective, right? So I think this is a really powerful picture to me that sort of shows what happens and why the divergent thinking is so critical that we really need to focus on that, right? And this is, looks a little bit like an eye chart at first, but I think, the quote at top I really like, right? Nothing is more dangerous than an idea when it's the only one we have. And this follows on the prior study. So a lot of the time, what you get from the creativity when we're old, we do the alternative use and we come up with a couple of ideas, and we believe these ideas are absolutely fabulous. But the truth is, we need a lot more ideas. And this is one where the two pictures I have shown here, the picture on the left is an abstraction of when we think of, basically, I'll call them simple problems, but this is just day-to-day problems where convergent thinking is very helpful, right? So it's something where it falls into the optimization space. We can optimize a problem and solve it and do the best possible, right? That's a smooth landscape. Things are well understood. If you imagine you're walking up a hill, you get to the top. If you start going down, you take a step back. Great. The problem is, in entrepreneurship and innovative solutions, really are best characterized by the picture on the right. Excuse me. The picture on the right is one where it's a rugged landscape with lots of peaks all over the place. And so sure, we can hang out on this one peak and think that we're walking towards the best solution, but if we just stay in that one meaning, that narrow meaning, we're missing out on lots of the big value that lies way out there. And this is really where the power of diversity comes about, right? Diverse perspectives, and I'll argue wild ideas, are going to help us get away from our little local hill off to some other spot. And very often it could just be someone questioning us, of saying, could you do it that way? Or, huh, you know, I've seen something done this way, why don't you think about that? And maybe the first time this is done, it's actually really low value. It's in a value. It's in a valley, sorry, excuse me. But it gets you to another spot. And then you're working on a different hill, right? So now you can try and climb a much taller mountain. And this is really, really where the power of diverse perspectives and wild ideas, seeing things from alternative cultures, alternative, really all different perceptions are going to help out. So I think, and that is the world which entrepreneurs operate in, right? We get to a point where we need to converge, but the real challenge is how do we find that really big hill to climb, right? And that can be when we're trying to come up with a small solution, or the overall opportunity as a whole. And the thing is, we have all of these biases, right? So as the George Land study in that picture showed us how we're just declining over time, there's a lot of biases at play, right? And if this is by no meant to be an exhaustive list, but these are just some really key challenges that we face, right? The confirmation bias, right? So if we're on that one hill and we're only seeking out information that confirms what we think, well, that's going to make it seem really good to us, but in the end, we're just on this really small mountain. This is the importance of making sure that we seek out alternative perspectives, that we talk to people with diverse perspectives, and that we listen, right? So this is one, again, where we're trying to balance that persistence, adversity, and you know, keeping on when others would quit. But we need to do that with the right information, right? This can be with how things are framed. We have to be careful with how we frame our own opportunities to others and how they frame them back to us. One of the things that comes about when I run these tests with groups a lot of the time is the whole notion of System 1 and System 2 thinking. This is I don't know how many people have read the Kahneman and Tversky, Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow, but the notion here is just that there's an automatic part of us, the System 1, that's fast, automatic, emotional, stereotypic, right? And this has been built up over our evolution to be survival, right? Our brain doesn't want to expend a ton of energy, so we have all these heuristics that allow us just to act really quickly. But sometimes that can get us in trouble because it has all of these automatic heuristics and stereotypes in it, and especially if we have a single perspective and we don't bring in diverse perspectives to question those, we keep going with System 1, and so we need to purposefully engage our System 2, which is slow, effortful. It's not used all the time, right? Because it takes a lot of energy. It's difficult. It's tiring. right? To run calculations, to think about things, to challenge our own thoughts. Again, when we have others that see things differently than we do, and we can create an environment, which gets to the next ones, that it has psychological safety, right? So the environment we hope to instill within our program, where people can challenge one another, where people feel free to challenge one another without taking it personally, right? That's what we need in order to make sure that we have the right opportunities and the right analysis and make the right decisions, right? Very important is all the ethnocentrism and cultural biases. These can come at a global scale, but also it can be manifested at a much more micro level in terms of working on a problem within your own group and thinking that everybody else thinks the same way as you do, right? These are the things that when you look at the demographics of our program now and the demographics of what we want to instill within this program, we're able to address these, right? Fear of failure and fear of evaluation, loss of all of these are factors that really hurt the entrepreneur's ability to come to the right decisions, right? So this is why I had given some kudos to Chelsea and Sebastian for earlier, putting yourself out there, right? So you did good on the fear of evaluation. This is one that's really difficult. So let me give you a nice little example that offers a positive spin on all of this. And this is an experiment that I run with classes, all over the world in many different contexts. And it's essentially that alternative use test, so the creativity test. Right? And so here you can see the distribution when I offer this to participants initially. And so there's always a number of people that when you put an object there, they come up with less than 5 uses for it. And this is within 3 minutes or so. The majority are 6 to 10, and this is just one instance where I had administered it. And then you see kind of the 11 to 15, and no one had anything more than 20, and there was really, I think, that was 1 or 2 people that had in the 16 to 20 range, right? So again, that's a fairly low number. But then we had an intervention, and the intervention was one where we essentially ran some exercises. In this, it was improv exercises, but these are all geared towards addressing the fear of evaluation, and opening up one's perspective to just say ideas and share, right? So you can do this, and this was maybe a half hour, 40 minutes worth of an intervention. And I think this is what's interesting, right? So just after this intervention, the results are shown in red, right? And what's important here, and a very important takeaway from this, is it's not just that you have the people in the 16 to 20 shifting out to 31 to 35, but you get a shift in the distribution, right? So by doing purposeful exercises and purposeful learning and paying attention to how we think, right? So a lot of this was in the discussion of System 1, System 2 thinking, and how we have to try and get ourselves out of normal routines and challenge ourselves to move into other areas. By having this sort of an intervention, we're able to shift the distribution. And this is something that I would argue the intervention here, whereas this was just a half hour to 40-minute intervention, the intervention that we hope to have within the Launchpad, within the master's and postgraduate diploma, this is an intervention that we hope to systemically allow you to shift your distribution out, right? So as a cohort, coming in might be more like the blue, but we're hoping then by the power of diverse opinions and by the systemic way that we structure the program, we can see a nice shift in the distribution. So this is the question at this point is, okay, so how do we instill this? Where do we see this? And I think here it would come from really the top down all the way through our program. So if we start at the most basic level, the program is not just an academic program, right? So we have the academic side, we have mentoring, we have practitioners, we have the community of our current cohort and our past cohort. So one of the big things within our program is once you join, you're joining as a member of the community, right? So we've had recent pitch events just 2 weeks ago, and then we had another one in January where we had people that were alumni of the program come and pitch their ventures at those as well, right? So there's definitely an ongoing communication between the current students and past students. So the top level is, just from academic teaching, and we have, the mentoring and practitioners, and then our community. But then we see the bottom part, and this is just the most a rough representation. We're offering to tailor towards diverse needs of the population, of the cohort that's coming in. And to elaborate on that, there's some people that might be more versed in finance and business, and we offer the option that there's a required core course that they can test out of and not take that. There's also then it's not a course where everybody is going to take the exact same courses all the way along. We're going to look at each individual's needs, what they want to do, where they want to go through mentoring, and to put together a pathway, basically a journey through the program that makes sense for you. So the core will be almost the same for everyone, with the exception of you can test out of the finance course. Then once we get to the electives and pathways, you choose your own electives, clearly, but then you have the option on the pathways to either take pathways as being assessed or not assessed. And let me just spend a brief moment to talk a little bit more on the pathways, because embedded in the pathways is another aspect that we instill from diversity. So the pathways are geared towards the industry that you want to go into. But the pathways, starting in next year's cohort, will take place in the residentials, where there's 2 days in the March residential and 2 days in the July residential. And each one of these days, even if you're taking it for assessment and you have a dedicated industry, each day only half of the seminars that you take will be from your industry. So everybody is required to participate in a pathway that most likely it could be on AI, it could be on digital marketing, it could be on dealing with regulatory issues, it could be something that cuts across, given by someone from an industry. You'll choose which pathway you take, but it's not going to be your specific industry, right? So the idea is to make sure we instill diverse perspectives, and that if someone is going into fintech, they're not only surrounded by people that either are interested in fintech or have a financial background. They're going to be people that are in biotech or in consumer and retail. This is going to allow a much richer discussion by design, right? So this is something that we want to be really purposeful about and make sure that it's instilled in our program. So I think on this, that's kind of the specialist pathway. The general pathway is one where it's not that you don't take pathways. You participate in these pathway days, which are really just specialist seminars in the residentials. You just can choose whether or not you want that to be assessed in place of an elective, or whether you want to do that as a benefit that's not assessed and take an elective differently. So if you think of it, there's a number of different paths and a number of different combinations that could be put together to accommodate many, many different needs. So that's kind of it's a very quick overview kind of our view here of why we try and incorporate so much and really design things. The specialist pathways are really a sort of a key element of how we instill it in the program. We're closing on time, but I want to make sure I open things up. If there are any questions on this, and I'll actually make sure I get to the last part, right? So if there's details on the website in terms of applying for the program. If there's any questions, please reach out to us there. But if there's any specific questions that I could address while we're in the webinar together right now, I would love to hear from you. So I'll give some time if anyone has some questions to chime in on. And if there's not questions, I definitely want to thank you for your attention. Sometimes it would be nice if we could be face to face, but these are a great opportunity to at least share our everything that we're doing here at the Cambridge Judge Launchpad. And we're very excited about kind of where it's going and what we've learned from this year's cohort and how we can just continue to build and improve. So thank you, Sebastian. So we hope please keep an eye on the website. If you see events coming up, please join us. Please reach out to us with any questions, and we'd be excited to share everything we have going on here. We definitely think we're building a really special thing. So I'll thank you with that. I'll stick around for a minute or two in case anyone has any additional questions, but I think we're, if not, we'll sign off. So thank you again.